Welcome to the Pastor Study at Faith Community Church, and I'm going to speak out of Proverbs chapter 2 and chapter 4. Actually, the first 5-6 chapters of Proverbs is how we are to set our hearts toward God and to have the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And to start with, in Proverbs chapter 2, verse 6, "For the Lord gives wisdom, and out of his mouth comes knowledge and understanding." And then looking over in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 7, tells us, "Wisdom's the principal thing, therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding." So as Christians, what we have to have is knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And we need to understand that that doesn't just come from our little tiny enclosure of Christianity as we know it. When God's talking about knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, he's talking about knowing the world that you're in so that we can be socially functional and leaders in that world. Now, this past week, I received in the mail, finally, I ordered a while back, a picture that I have on my phone, and it's a new library in London that was bombed. And no sooner had they fixed it than the war starts, and so here's a bombed out library, the top is off, and here are three men, and I'm looking at that, and what emotional and psychological truths are in this picture. That men are seeking knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, even though the enemy wants to destroy them. And so if you remember that as a Christian and as an individual, that the enemy wants you to be ignorant. The enemy wants to keep knowledge away from you. We know that in steps of communism. First of all, there's socialism. That leads into communism. And what's the first thing they do? They take away the priests. They take away the educators. They take away knowledge. They take away the Bible, the national anthem, the flag, and on and on. And you see that this is already being attacked in our nation today. The enemy wants us to be ignorant, but God says, seek knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. One of the truths, and this past week I read Killing Patton. I love this book, and so here you have Patton, and you have the good guys on this side. You have Churchill and Roosevelt, and on the other side of Patton, you have Hitler and Stalin. And just to ask how much knowledge you have, who's the most evil man in the history of the world? And you'll probably say Hitler was. Well, Hitler killed less people than Stalin killed after the war. And so you Google it right on your phone. You don't even have to find a book pro or con. And so what we need to know in our lives are, where is the battle line drawn? And Patton drew that line. And people on both sides resented him because he was so adamant about it. But one of his comments in that book, he says, many know too much about too little. Now, he was talking about warriors. He was talking about other generals and people that were promoted that were not military raised or experienced, but all of a sudden they were placed in these high positions. And so he said they knew a whole lot about what they were taught, but too little about too much. Now, quoting T.S. Eliot, he says, we know too much and are convinced of too little. Our literature is a substitute for religion, and so is our religion. Otherwise, we get into this religion and then we forget the literature. Or other people are into the literature and they forget the religion or the relationship with God. Need to remember that Paul in the Bible in Acts went to Mars Hill in the synagogue and he debated with the minds of the world. He debated the philosophy, the law, the politics, the religion, the social issues. He was knowledgeable. And as Christians, we need to be knowledgeable. We need to be able to carry on conversation. Now, listen to this. Paul began where the listeners were, and then he logically explained the gospel of Christ. And if we're ignorant to people and their opinions and their philosophies and where they're coming from, then we fail to communicate. We're just waiting for God to do this magical thing, and God says, no, get knowledge, wisdom, and understanding so you can converse with people in your life. Now, Einstein said, science without religion is lame. Okay, science without religion is lame. And religion without science is blind. Otherwise, Einstein didn't have a personal God. He was Jewish, and he didn't believe that you could pray and make God, cut the cards or throw the dice according to your will. But he did believe in a supernatural being or essence that would govern us that we needed to know about. So I ask you, which comes first, knowledge or wisdom? See, wisdom is built upon knowledge, but that means you can be both wise and knowledgeable, but you can't be wise without knowledge. And so how wise are you, or otherwise how knowledgeable are you in different areas? When I am constantly asked about theological questions and God and doctrine and that sort of thing, you have the conservative, then you have the moderate, then you have the liberal, and you have extremes on both ends. And the extremes, remember the firebrands? We're not the firebrands. And so don't listen to firebrands on either end, whether it's political, religious. So the different schools I went to a Bible-believing school, a Pentecostal school, a Catholic school, and a postmodern school. And they're all different based philosophies about religion, so that I can converse with any so-called Christian, and half of those were not Christian. You need to be knowledgeable so you can speak to where somebody is and then lead them in a practical way for the need of Jesus Christ. Now, an intelligent heart acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. That's in Proverbs chapter 18. Another proverb, 15, the heart of him who has understanding seeks knowledge, but the truth of the fools feed on folly. Otherwise, when we get knowledge, we're expanding our understanding so we can see and tell where someone's coming from. But so many times, there's this concept in religiosity and denomination or whatever. We have that little dime of ours, and we're polishing it, and we know much about too little, instead of knowing a lot about a lot or a little about a lot, so we can converse with others and where they are. And so I have this small picture, and the reason I brought it down off the books shelf is because I'm putting this other picture up above it. It says, ignorance is more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. I'll say that again. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than knowledge. Talk to an ignorant person about a topic and they're adamant, especially when it comes to God, and they're little tiny dime. They know too much about too little. How much more of God do we need to know and experience in our life? How much more of the Scripture do we need to know and experience in our life? So ignorance frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. It is those who know little, not those who know much, who so positively assert this or that. I know what I believe, and don't confuse me with the facts. Well, don't expand my understanding of God or of the Scriptures or of life. Then I wrote in my own hand, it's hard to educate ignorance. It's hard to educate someone who wants to be ignorant. But God is telling us to seek knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. See, wisdom is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. 2 Timothy 2 tells us, reject and flee from the foolish and the ignorant. Don't debate with foolish and ignorant people. That's just babbling. That's like a babbling brook. They're up here, they're very shallow, they can cover a lot of territory, but they have no depth. So Scripture says, reject and flee from the fool and the ignorant. Then James 1 says, seek wisdom, and it shall be given to you. So as a wise Christian, seek God, ask Him for wisdom, and He will give you understanding. Ignorance and naivety are not Christian virtues. We need to gain knowledge from the books you read, but meditate on God's heart. That was the word of knowledge that God gave me a couple weeks ago, is gain knowledge from the books you read, but meditate on God's heart. And so we have all this vast knowledge, and we can get sucked into being worried and concerned about that, about end times, or about the military, or about the election, or about COVID, or we can get sucked in. We need to know about all that, but we need to meditate on God's heart to walk us through all that, to stay at the peace that God has and what He's given to us. And so tonight I'd encourage you, keep learning. One author says, keep learning till you learn that, or keep knowing till you know that you don't know. And keep learning more and more about God. Asking for the wisdom for your life, for your family's life, for this church life. And remember, behind it all, and that's why He's going to minister to you, is because He loves you. Why? Yes. Love, love, love. God is love. Blessings.